Hello everyone, I'm Santanaka. Nice to meet you. Today I will install Proxmox VE on a physical machine. Proxmox VE is an open-source virtualization platform based on Debian. You can create and manage multiple virtual machines and containers on a physical server. On a single physical machine, you can create multiple virtual machines and containers and run them simultaneously. Especially when the physical machine is equipped with a GPU. Passing through the GPU into the virtual machines allows you to use the GPU in the virtual environment, which is very beneficial.
So, this means we can run Linux and Windows simultaneously.
Yes, also, while macOS is typically only installable on Apple hardware, it is possible to run it on a virtual machine using specific methods and tools. Once you have downloaded the file, let's prepare and install it on the physical machine. To install on a physical machine, you need to write the downloaded ISO file to a USB drive and make it bootable. We will use a handy software called FreeDOS to write the file. Hearing this, some might wonder,
Are there methods other than using a USB drive? There wasn't enough free space on the USB drive.
Besides booting from a USB drive, there are also options such as using a DVD or PXE boot over a network. Most PCs have network devices, so PXE boot is recommended. Regarding the creation of a bootable USB drive, the DD image mode is selected for this ISO file. Let me explain a bit about this mode. Since this ISO file was chosen to be written in DD image mode, Windows will not recognize these file systems by default after creation, so you won't be able to access the files. Some ISO images may have multiple partitions. When written in DD image mode, the partition structure is also written as is, so Windows may recognize it as multiple drives.
I have a small concern. Will it function as a bootable disk even if Windows does not recognize it as a file system?
Yes, the DD image mode copies the entire ISO image to the USB drive as is, preserving the bootloader and necessary boot sector information, so it will function as a bootable disk. Now, let's insert the USB drive into the physical machine and install Proxmox VE. To boot from the USB and install Proxmox VE, set the USB drive as the highest priority boot device in the BIOS or UEFI settings. Set the USB drive as the highest priority boot device. Additionally, on some systems, you may need to adjust the UEFI and legacy boot settings. Furthermore, secure boot should be disabled, as it can cause compatibility issues with some operating systems. In fact, there was a time when my Ubuntu system wouldn't boot after an update, and disabling secure boot fixed the issue. Oh, while we're talking, we've reached the step to select the installation destination. This PC doesn't have a lot of hard disk space, so I'd like to proceed as is, but let's check what options are available. If the hard disk has a large capacity, you can create custom partitions to use the disk space efficiently. If you want to select your country for the region and time zone, you can quickly proceed by entering the initial letter of your country. Next, you need to enter the password and email address. But please note that the username will be root. In the network settings, there were 2 devices available, so I chose Wi-Fi. But I recommend using a wired connection. If you select a wired connection and have a router, it will automatically input appropriate values for the IP address, gateway, and DNS server.
If the router is functioning as a DHCP server, these values will be entered automatically. For those in special environments, should they input the values manually?
In the video example, being able to select Wi-Fi suggests that the Wi-Fi adapter is recognized. However, since the encryption key input screen did not appear, I had to enter it manually. Eventually, I realized that I needed to edit the network configuration file later. Moreover, I noticed later that the official website states that Wi-Fi is not recommended.
I see, but during the installation of Debian itself, you can configure Wi-Fi. It's interesting that this is different for Proxmox VE, even though it is based on Debian.
Actually, I also realized later that you can install Proxmox VE after installing Debian. The installation is almost complete. Shortly, a URL to access via the browser will be displayed. After restarting, the installation will be complete. Use another computer to access the URL displayed earlier. Even on the local network, HTTPS is used by default to enhance security. You will see a warning, but proceed to access it.
Oh, the login screen has appeared. Here, the username is root, and the password is the one you set during the installation.
Yes. Make sure to set the language first before entering the username and password to avoid doing it twice.
Oh, even though it's open source, there's a subscription message.
Proxmox VE is open source and can be used without a subscription, but commercial support and access to the enterprise repository are restricted. We will disable the enterprise repository and configure it to use the no subscription repository. There are several methods to do this. In this video, we will demonstrate how to configure it using the browser interface. From personal experience, deleting the configuration cannot be done via the browser, so I had to use SSH to make the changes. First, select the repository that includes Enterprise and click the Disable button. Next, click the Add button and select the non-subscription repository from the list.
I see, it's great that operations typically done via command line can be done through the browser.
Yes, the message has also changed, so this should be fine. Next, let's actually install the OS. The original plan was to install Windows or Linux because you can use the GPU even in a virtual machine and generate images, but that would be too ordinary, so I will install a completely different OS. I researched other videos, but none of them showed how to install FreeDOS, so I will try this.
This is quite niche. Thank you.
Extract the downloaded file. If the ISO file can be downloaded directly, you can also save it from the Proxmox VE interface. Send the extracted ISO file to the Proxmox VE server. Please wait until the upload is complete. I've sent the file, so now let's use this ISO file to install FreeDOS. Click the Create VM button to configure the machine. Note that you can select the file we uploaded earlier in the ISO image field. The only items to change are the disk size and memory size. Since we are not sure if it will work yet, we'll leave the unfamiliar items as they are and deal with them as needed. You can also add devices that are not listed here, or multiple of the same devices later.
Proxmox VE uses a different interface and terminology compared to VMware and VirtualBox, so it can be confusing at first.
I also learned this later, so I experienced some confusion as well. In the meantime, the configuration is set. Let's start up the virtual machine with this configuration. To check it, double-click the created virtual machine or select the virtual machine and choose the console option. Oh, is it not booting properly? It seems that the virtual machine won't start with this configuration. I'm having trouble even getting to the installation screen. So I'll review the hardware.
This is the screen where it won't boot, right? The OS is special, so it seems challenging.
Yes, as a result, changing the processor allowed it to boot, but the cause is unknown. In the video, I'm using a Pentium, but it worked with other processors as well. Start it from the console as before. I was relieved to see the FreeDOS installation screen. At this point, none of the keyboard keys are responsive. In this case, there is a check mark next to View Only in the settings, so uncheck it and you're good to go. Once you reach this point, the rest is the same as usual, so I'll fast forward. However, since you can't proceed after the first reboot, I'll explain how to handle it. Those who have installed it before might know But for the second boot of FreeDOS, you need to boot from the media to format the hard disk. Since this screen is booting from the hard disk, we'll stop and change the boot order. You can change the order in the options.
Is this process of changing the order necessary for Linux and Windows as well?
For the latest OS, it is likely done automatically, but for older OS versions, you might need to manually change the order like this. Once the installation is complete, you need to change the order again to boot from the hard disk. Here is the screen showing a successful installation. Actually, the virtual device is incorrect, so at this point you still cannot connect to the network. Although I don't think anyone will be in this situation, for those who absolutely need to connect to the network, I have provided the method in the link in the video description, so please refer to it. Here is the screen after completing the network setup and being assigned an IP address from the router. Additionally, I tried installing Ubuntu 24.04 and had no particular difficulties. By using Proxmox VE, you can achieve an environment similar to dual boot or triple boot.
I see, so as long as the machine specs allow, you can create multiple VMs and use them more conveniently.
That's all for now. See you next time. Goodbye.